is the way. This is the way.
Welcome, everybody. Today we're going to be revisiting Chapter 16, titled The Rescue. Before we get into it, if you're a fan of our videos, please like our content and subscribe to the channel. It really does help us out and gives us the opportunity to create more content for you. All right, so let's dive into Season 2 finale of The Mandalorian. First off, in this episode, it was written by Jon Favreau himself. Along with Dave Filoni, they've produced some of the best content for Star Wars in this new era of Disney. And the episode was directed by none other than Peyton Reed. If that name sounds familiar to you, he's got a little movie coming out here next week. I don't know if you guys know. It's just a little underground movie called Ant-Man and the Wasp: Quantumania. Hearing some good buzz about that. He's directed all 3 of the Ant-Man movies. So, start of this episode, we open up the episode with a space chase. We see the Slave 1 and an Imperial Lambda class T4 shuttle, and we learn right away that the shuttle is transporting Dr. Pershing, and he's played by Omid Abtahi. He's that clone scientist who was studying Grogu from the first season. And quick shout out to the pilot in this episode from that shuttle, who was absolutely stellar. So that actor's name was Thomas E. Sullivan. He's only played in a couple of things that I could find, like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. He was also on The Irishman. But man, he was able to exude exactly what these Imperial remnants mindset is all about. I like how he brought up the millions of lives that were killed on the Death Stars as well. Just his mannerisms were perfect. And I feel like a lot of these Imperial remnants are kind of fanatics at this point, like the ultra crazies that are out there that are all in for the Empire and everything, and they want to see that return to the galaxy. This showed absolutely what a radicalized mindset these Imperials do have. They basically believe that they're the good guys trying to bring back order to the galaxy, which is really cool. And then we see that Din and Boba track down Bo-Katan in this, which is awesome. Whenever we go to this planet, it's not named. And so a lot of people actually thought that this was Lothal from Rebels, and that would have been really cool to see. But we find out, according to the reference book Star Wars: The Mandalorian Handbook by Matt Jones, the planet was actually identified as Lafette. Then we get to see Bo-Katan and Casca Reeves sitting down at a bar. Now, these two are actually a part of the group called the Night Owls. And if you don't know who the Night Owls are, they're a female Mandalorian unit that is led by Bo-Katan. They've been around forever, since the Clone Wars and everything. But I remember when I was first watching this episode, I was wondering where that male Mandalorian was from that previous episode. And his name was Axe Wove, and he's actually not a member of the Night Owls, but he was a member of Clan Kreese, which obviously Bo-Katan's the leader of Clan Kreese, and she's Bo-Katan Kryze, if you didn't know. And it's not clear where he's at this point, but I can imagine he's off trying to recruit or build up support to take back Mandalore, which we find out is Bo-Katan's ultimate goal here. And we see that Boba Fett, is scoffing at the idea of this planet because he mentions that the Empire has turned the planet to glass. So I was like, ooh, that's really interesting. And we had a call back in the finale episode of Season 1 where Moff Gideon talks about the Night of 1,000 Tears. And so we're just getting parcels of information about actually what happened to Mandalore in the canon version of history, which is all interesting. Bo-Katan does mention at this point that Boba Fett isn't a Mandalorian, just a clone, which is very interesting. And I wonder, it's debatable to me at this point in time. We got things from Legends, we got things from canon, but Legends version, Boba Fett's father, Jango Fett, was actually adopted by a Mandalorian leader named Jaster Muriel. And eventually Jango became the Mandalore himself, the ultimate leader of the Mandalorians for a time. But again, that's all part of Legends at this point. I don't know what they're going to bring into canon, but as far as Boba Fett being a Mandalorian, technically he is, but at the same time, Boba Fett has admitted that he doesn't follow the way of the Mandalore. So it's going to be interesting to see what they bring in from this Legends material. But if you want to find out more about that, I'll be exploring that story in my ongoing series, The History of the Mandalorians, in Chapter 3. It's all stuff, background information that's going to get us up to speed with who the Mandalorians are through Legends lore and canon. So check that out on Mondays. It's a really cool little series that I do. We'll explore a little bit more about Jaster Muriel during that time. Bo-Katan and alongside Casca Reeves agree to help Din in his mission here because Din offers Bo-Katan Gideon's cruiser, and also Bo-Katan mentions that she also wants to get the Darksaber, and she reiterates it time and time again that she's the one that wants to take down Moff Gideon. During the planning phases, after they agree to help them, Dr. Pershing actually ends up being a huge help to the Mando crew here, which for me, he doesn't seem to be one of those fanatics for the Empire, just a scientist that's really curious. And throughout the series, he's been shown that he does care for the well-being of Grogu. So it'll be interesting to see how they develop Dr. Pershing's character moving forward, because we do see him in the season 3 trailer. So we know that he's going to return, and hopefully we'll get more of his backstory in season 3. I hope so. At this point, Dr. Pershing does mention the 3rd generation Dark Troopers, which are an experimental combat droid, which are really cool, man. And I looked up a lot of this history for this episode. So the original Dark Troopers were designed to be worn by soldiers. So they're designed to be worn by actual soldiers. And they were actually worn by cyborg clone troopers who had about 70% of their body parts replaced with mechanical components, which is really crazy. And now that we know that the clone troopers are being decommissioned in the Bad Batch, we just found that out last episode. I'm really wondering, guys, if we'll get to see some of these clones repurposed into Dark Troopers. If we'll actually get to see that story in Bad Batch. I hope we do. It'll be really cool to see that. So, and the 3rd generation are the ones that we're seeing here in Mandalorian. We're the first to take the human element completely out of the suits, and now they're just completely droids. The Dark Troopers resemble the DT Sentry droids that we actually see in Rebels. They look pretty close to those droids, but they're not actually the same type of droids. They're different altogether. And at this point, our crew then uses the Imperial shuttle to board the cruiser as they appear to be attacked by Boba Fett. And I love this. This is what I absolutely love about this is Moff Gideon really doesn't take the bait. He's like, something's up. And so it was really cool to get to see TIE fighters actually launch from this cruiser. I think it's the first time that we actually get to see TIE fighters launch from a cruiser. And I thought that was really cool. And the light cruiser, if you guys didn't know, is a class 546 model of the Arguntan class command cruiser. And it looks very similar to the Venator class Star Destroyers that we saw in Revenge of the Sith and that we get to see in Bad Batch as well. Very similar design. It's a smaller cruiser than the regular Star Destroyer classes that we see. So this is definitely a remnant from the Empire. And the Night Owls, Fennec Shan and Cara Dune make an attack on the bridge. And they're doing that to distract all these forces so they can pull those away from the brig where Grogu's at. Which we get to follow along with Den as he sneaks over and tries to rescue him. And I love seeing the Mandalorians utilizing their jetpacks in combat during this part. And I can't wait to see more of that next season. I can't wait to see more of the combat with Mandalorians in season 3. We're getting a lot more of them. So it should be awesome to get to see. The fights in this episode were absolutely well done. And hats off to the coordinator here, Ryan Watson. He was the fight coordinator of this episode. And he actually won an Emmy for this series, which is well-deserved. It was just fantastic all around. Great job, guys. Then Din finds the Dark Troopers are already activated. He tries to get them jettisoned off of the Star Cruiser there, but he has to fight one-on-one, and it shows how extremely deadly these Dark Troopers are. And Din absolutely struggles to get the upper hand here. Luckily, he's able to take one down with his Beskar staff and jettisons the rest of the Dark Troopers into space. So it was really cool. So this scene definitely sets up the idea that these Dark Troopers are no joke, and they're not like the regular stormtroopers that we see, like the Night Owls, Fennec Shan, and Cara Dune just wipe the floor with throughout the cruiser. Like, they're so easy to take down. So it's very clear to see why they need to upgrade from the stormtroopers in this. And then Din finally gets to Grogu. He gets to the brig, and what do we see? We see Moff Gideon right there, played by Giancarlo Esposito, who I absolutely love, who played Gustavo Fring in Breaking Bad as well as Better Call Saul. Love this guy. He does an absolute fantastic job as Moff Gideon in here. And he explains during this time that they needed Grogu to study his blood, which he quotes as saying is going to bring back order to the galaxy. So this really does seem like they're threading that needle for Palpatine to return. I know you guys don't want it to be linked up with the sequels, but it really seems like they're trying to fill in the holes and the gaps on how Palpatine returned. We've seen those clone tanks in the earlier episode this season of The Mandalorian. So all of this stuff is being geared towards bringing a clone back that is force sensitive. So they're really trying their best to get a force sensitive clone made so that Palpatine can return. So a lot of people don't like the sequels, but if they can improve upon the sequels at all, I have a lot of faith in Dave Filoni and Jon Favreau to try and do that. I mean, the Clone Wars animated show did a phenomenal job at making me like the prequel trilogy. So maybe they'll do the same thing here with the sequels. Who knows, guys? I don't know. Maybe. But I'm enjoying The Mandalorian. So it's going to be interesting to see what happens with that. So regardless of how it connects with the sequels, I love this show. I love where they're going. I love that the stories that they're going to explore between these movies, between this time in the Mandalorian time. So it's going to be a lot of fun to get to see. So of course, Gideon says that Din can actually take Grogu, and his only request is that he leaves the ship. And Din's all about it. He's just like, I'm here for the kid. I don't really care what's going on here. I just want to get this kid out of here. But Gideon obviously turns around and tries to fight him, which we see at this point that Gideon is extremely proficient with the Darksaber, guys. And then later we see in Book of Boba Fett that, we learn that the Darksaber is extremely heavy and hard to wield for Din during this time. You got to be really in sync with this Darksaber. So it's really interesting that Moff Gideon is so proficient with this saber. And it makes me wonder if this guy is possibly force sensitive at all. What do you guys think? Do you think that he might have a little force sensitivity since he was able to wield that Darksaber to great effect during this fight scene? But eventually, we see that Din does best Moff Gideon in this and spares his life, and he thereby earns the Darksaber. This is setting up a big thing for season 3. So he takes him up to the bridge. Bo-Katan sees to her horror and Moff Gideon's delight that Din is now wielding the Darksaber. This scene and the circumstance we see is directly setting up the plot for season 3 of The Mandalorian. And I bet that we'll see Bo-Katan and Din at odds with each other, and some will rally to Din's side as the leader of Mandalore, and some will rally to Bo-Katan's side as the leader of Mandalore. And it's going to set up Bo-Katan as the main antagonist for season 3 of The Mandalorian. I bet you that's where we're leading. What do you guys think? Let me know. Then we see that the Dark Troopers are actually reboarding the cruiser, and our Mando team is preparing to fight them off on the bridge there. And we see a lone X-Wing appear. I absolutely love when they see the X-Wing. Cara Dune comments, "One X-Wing? We're saved," sarcastically. That was really, and that's exactly what I was thinking whenever that came aboard. At this point in the episode, this is probably the best Star Wars moment that I've seen on television. And still to this day, this scene absolutely gets me every single time. We see a green lightsaber wielding Jedi cutting through those Dark Troopers like it's child's play. And we saw how difficult it was for Din to fight off one, but this guy is just running through these guys, just making it through like it's nothing. And right away, it's very clear that this is Luke Skywalker, who uses the Form 5 Dimso, if you didn't know, which is a lightsaber combat form that actually Anakin uses as well. He uses Form 5 as well. So it's really cool to get to see this and to see that fight choreographer bring all these amazing stunts to life, and they do it justice. Absolutely looks brilliant in this episode. And here, we have at the end of this, when he cuts through all those Dark Troopers, they let him on board, and we see Luke coming through the smoke with his green saber, just making his pops proud because it's an homage to Rogue One when Vader's in the hallway at the end there. Looks exactly the same. The shots set up exactly the same way, and I absolutely love that. And this whole scene really did affect me on a very deep emotional level, guys. I loved Luke Skywalker growing up, and he's one of my favorite characters in the original trilogy. I always wanted to see Luke at his peak after Return of the Jedi, and I've read all these expanded universe novels, which are now called Legends, about Luke Skywalker during this period of time. And I always imagined what it would be like to get to see Mark Hamill actually reprise the role and play this part of Luke in his prime. And I felt like, we got to the sequel trilogy and we didn't really get to see Luke in his prime during that. We didn't get to see that. So it was very much a letdown for me. And I know some of you might like the sequels, and that's great. And I'm glad that you do. I really didn't care for how they portrayed Luke in that. So I felt very let down. So seeing this moment in The Mandalorian meant so much for me as a diehard fan of Luke Skywalker. Brought so much emotion out. I'm not afraid to admit, I'm man enough to admit that I might have shed a few tears seeing this. And I got to say, I rewatched it again earlier this week, and I watched it again today just to prepare for this episode. And it still did. It still hit me on a deep emotional level seeing this Luke Skywalker on screen, because this is the Luke that I've always wanted to see, and I'm so glad that we got this in The Mandalorian. It was such a surprise when it first aired in December 2020 for me, and it just was a big deal. It was awesome too, you know, getting to see the behind the scenes stuff. They actually brought Mark Hamill back for this, and he helped bring that younger version of Luke back to life. And they did use a stand-in. His name was Max Lloyd Jones, and he served as the body double for this. Now, they accomplished this look for Luke Skywalker when he revealed himself through a CGI version of Mark Hamill with de-aging technology to digitally animate this character. Now, for me, you know, they're still kind of in the uncanny valley for this episode, so he didn't look spot on to me. It still looked a little off, but at the same time, it didn't matter. I was extremely happy to get to see Luke Skywalker again, so I can kind of brush that off. Whenever they were filming this with Hamill and Max Lloyd Jones, so Jones was able to mimic a lot of Hamill's mannerisms. So Mark Hamill got to be there on set. He was wearing the full Luke Skywalker outfit. It was just, I love that they were able to incorporate him into this as well. And after this episode, there was a YouTuber, I don't know if you guys know this story, but his name was Shamook. And he used this deepfake technology to alter Luke in this scene. And eventually Lucasfilm found out, and they saw this, and they actually hired Shamook to work on future projects to help create de-aged versions, which we later get to see in Book of Boba Fett. And we're also going to get to see Harrison Ford in the next Indiana Jones movie, The Dial of Destiny. So it's really cool, and it's brilliant. I gotta say, it looks amazing, especially the Indiana Jones, the de-aged Indiana Jones in the trailer. Looks amazing and opens up the door and the possibility for us to see these younger characters brought back into Star Wars. And my hope is that we'll get another trilogy in between Return of the Jedi and The Force Awakens with de-aged Luke, with de-aged Harrison Ford, and we get the Mandalorian as well as Ahsoka, maybe even Ezra, Thrawn, all those characters coming back in a trilogy of their own during this time. And they could do it with this technology. It looks brilliant. It looks amazing. And all because this guy was on YouTube and he decided to create this by himself, a passion project of his own. And Lucasfilm hired him up. And so I love that. I love the fact that we're getting fans out there that are creating content and making a huge difference in what we're going to see in the future of Star Wars. This is what Lucasfilm, you need to do this more often. Get with these fans, talk to the fans, get these ideas that are out there that will produce amazing content for Star Wars in the future, because we love this stuff and we only want to see good stories moving forward. So back to Mandalorian, Luke tells Din that Grogu wants his permission to go, and we have an absolutely amazing scene between Din and Grogu at this point. Din breaks his code by removing his helmet, which will have major repercussions later on, and also does set up a story for season 3 of The Mandalorian. But it definitely shows that there's a big attachment and bond between these two characters, and something that they deeply share with each other, which makes it all the more heartbreaking that they have to part ways during this. But Din tells him that he shouldn't be scared, and Grogu goes off with Luke, and we get a cameo by R2-D2 in this as well, so we get to see R2-D2 as well. And it just feels like pure joy to me seeing all these characters brought up in this episode. Felt so much like Star Wars, and I gotta say, you know, this whole series has brought the magic and put that magic back in the bottle. This feels absolutely Star Wars. And I loved Andor. I liked Obi-Wan. It had its problems and everything, but a lot of these other shows don't feel like Star Wars to me. The Mandalorian definitely does feel like Star Wars and a good successor to all the movies that we've seen in the past. And it brings in all these elements from all the best elements from Star Wars. And they've definitely captured the magic in this show. And that's why I'm so excited to see it. It's brought in new fans for Star Wars as well, fans that haven't watched anything else besides The Mandalorian. So it's been something that's brought us together as well as a fandom, which I love. But they've done a really good job with that. And that's all because of Jon Favreau and Dave Filoni being at the helm of this stuff. We're going to get to see Ahsoka coming up soon, which is supposed to be absolutely stellar too. So I can't wait. So we get to the end of the episode here, and it does feel like the story has been completed because Din has completed his quest with Grogu, and he's finally protected. He's got the protection that he needs, and that story has wrapped up. His mission's done. But at the time, it was interesting because they could have stopped the series altogether at this point, and that could have been it for us. But we're obviously getting more story, and I'm excited about that. We're getting expanded stuff out there with Ahsoka. We're going to get to see some of the Rebels crew come back, the Ghost crew come back, as well as a show called Skeleton Crew. So it's awesome. We're in a time of plenty for Star Wars. Can't wait to see what happens with that. And we got to see and hear throughout this episode and at the end a swelling of the score, which is beautifully done. And I have to give all props to the composer of The Mandalorian, Ludwig Göransson. This guy is amazing. He did a phenomenal job with the Mandalorian. He gives us all these new themes, and it truly feels like Star Wars. He's a worthy successor to John Williams, in my opinion. And as a musician myself, I absolutely love these scores. And I actually listen to a lot of these scores on my off time, when I'm working or I'm doing the dishes as a dad, And finally, we get a post-credit scene at the end of the episode with, we see Bib Fortuna, and he apparently has taken over for Jabba the Hutt on Tatooine, and Boba Fett and Fennec Shand come in and straight up murder him, which is kind of fun to see. And this does set up Book of Boba Fett. And they actually say it's coming soon here. And oh, hey, not your status quo. You guys are following me now on Twitch. Thank you for the follow. If you guys haven't checked them out, you can check them out on Twitch and YouTube as well. They're a great channel. I absolutely love these guys. Doug, Dave, and Keith, they're amazing dudes. So thanks for the follow here. I do appreciate you guys following me, all the support you guys have given me, and the shares that you've done. Awesome channel. I love their content, and I love to connect with all these other nerds out there and all these other people that have a passion for this stuff too, and talk to them. And so check their stuff out alongside our stuff. It's awesome. So thank you, Not Your Status Quo. You guys are awesome. And so yeah, we get a setup here for Book of Boba Fett, and at this point I was very excited for this, and I love to see this at the end. I was like, oh, can't wait to see this, because in The Mandalorian, Boba Fett comes off as this extremely awesome character and everything. And we get what we get in the Book of Boba Fett. And we'll talk more about that in the next couple of episodes. But it looked really cool, and I was really excited for that to come up after The Mandalorian Season 3. So that takes us to the end of this episode. That's my full breakdown and insights for you guys here about The Mandalorian Chapter 16, titled The Rescue. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you go back and revisit this episode, because it is rewatchable. And if I was to rate this episode, it's got to be a 10 out of 10 for me here at Fatherly Fandom. So it's a brilliant episode. Just getting Luke back is amazing. Next week, I'll be tackling the Book of Boba Fett, Chapter 5, The Return of the Mandalorian, which, like I said, is essential viewing before Season 3 of The Mandalorian. So stay tuned for that. We'll be doing that Friday at 5 p.m. here, Pacific Standard Time for you guys. And once we get into Mandalorian Season 3, what I'll be doing is I'll be doing a live broadcast at 5 p.m. on those days, going over the latest episode, and then on the next day, I'll edit that video together and post that up on YouTube for you guys to watch. So thanks for joining me today on Fatherly Fandom, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. And from our families to yours, have a good one, and may the Force be with you.